This is The Second Studio, hosted by two architects, myself, David Lee, and Marina Board Deronay. I think that's what we usually say. And this is a long-awaited after-hours recording. And the reason why I don't remember what we say at the introduction is it's actually been about 3 months since we've done 3 months? 2.5 months since we've done a recording. We recorded a bunch of episodes and backlogged them. Took a little bit of a break. And why are you looking? This is a podcast.
No, yeah, but we don't need to. We don't need to say every behind-the-scene information that is irrelevant and not interesting to anybody but you. Like nobody cares.
No, I think they care. They want to know what's going on. Transparency.
Yeah, so you're basically telling that you're serving people content that's like 3 months old.
Yeah, so what?
It's like nobody wants to listen to old content. They want freshly baked stuff.
They've already listened to it, though.
Okay, I don't know.
And so, yeah, this is an after-hours conversation where anything can happen. We don't know what we're going to talk about. But it was good, right? This is good. Yeah. Good introduction. Okay, here we go. No, sponsors. That's what I say. Sponsors. If you need to get 2D or 3D as-built of a project, then you should check out Canvas, an iPhone and iPad app. Here's how it works. Using Canvas, you scan the house, and then Canvas processes the scan to produce the as-built automatically, so you don't have to do any measuring. The file formats include ArchiCAD, Revit, AutoCAD, Vectorworks, SketchUp, and others. Canvas has been a great tool for us, and I know many of you will find it helpful, so check them out by visiting canvas.io/SSP or click the link in our show notes to schedule a demo and get your first as-built for free. Managing projects efficiently is critical to any office, but it can be a challenge. Fortunately, there is a solution, and it is Programma. Programma is a tool that is used by thousands of designers across 75 countries. It allows you to manage all aspects of a project in one place. What does it offer? It has specification schedules, client dashboards, mood boards, product libraries, invoices, purchase orders, and the powerful web clipper, which allows you to save images from the internet and incorporate them into your schedules, pinboards, product library, or image library. Click the link in our show notes to learn more and use the code Second Studio at checkout to save 25% off your annual subscription. This is The Second Studio with the two of us. Here we go. All right. Current events. A lot has transpired since the last time we did a recording. We have a new president-elect. Christmas happened. Thanksgiving happened. The New Year happened. And then fires happened. And probably a lot of other things, too, that I'm not, in tune with across the world. But generally speaking, in our lives, those are like the 4 or 5 events, right? So,
yeah.
So which of those events do you want to talk about?
None of them. Christmas? I don't know.
Well, we can talk about the fires, which is not a very funny topic at all, but has taken place. And I don't know, for anyone who doesn't know about the fires in LA, they started, early, mid-January, something like that? And there was like 3 or 4 of them that occurred.
I think there was 5 total.
And they all occurred in kind of the LA region. The 2 largest ones were in the Pacific Palisades on the west side, which is a very wealthy, very, very nice neighborhood. A lot of hillsides, and then the Eden fire more on the east side, and near like Altadena, which is a less wealthy area, and both of those were massive. So the scale of the Pacific Palisades fire by acres exceeds the footprint of Manhattan in New York. And are you looking up to see what it is right now?
Yeah, I have the Watch Duty app, which I guess is an app that is worth having if you live in California. The Palisades fire so far has burned over 23,000 acres.
It's really hard to comprehend that scale. That's why I think like comparative.
I think Manhattan, the size is about like in the teens or something.
Yeah.
So it's bigger than.
Well, let's see. How many acres is Manhattan? Okay, Manhattan is 14.6 acres. So that's like way larger than Manhattan. And it's really bad. I mean, a lot of people have lost houses. We know people who have lost houses. We have some, professional colleagues and certainly friends of friends who have lost their houses. And we go back and forth between San Francisco and Los Angeles, so we're kind of in tune with both places. But it's a bizarre thing. Like we're quite a distance from those 2 fires. So it's a very strange thing where we are to at most just have bad air quality.
I know.
There's ash and things, and it's definitely not good. But it's not the worst. Like we experienced the fire up north. Was it 3? Well, it was during COVID, I think. So
3 years
5
ago,
years, 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
And the air quality then was way, way worse than what we experienced here, I think, although we just didn't go outside.
Oh, it was bad. Like, it was so bad in the Bay Area that the light was... we had the lights on inside our house, like, the whole day.
Yeah.
The sky was orange. The light was orange. It just felt like, I don't know, the end of the world, or you were wearing, like, orange glasses. It was very strange.
Yeah.
The air was really bad. Which is weird because I felt like those fires were still pretty far from where we were.
It's just I think it's just the wind. The wind was going that direction.
The wind was probably blowing that direction.
Like in our case, the wind wasn't going toward us and where we are in Los Angeles, so it wasn't as bad. But yeah, in San Francisco, I forgot about that. The sky was like a dark gray orange the entire day.
Yeah, there's just ash like slowly falling from the sky throughout the day. It was pretty apocalyptic.
Yeah. Probably could have used more air purifiers at that time, but it is very strange to know that there's this massive catastrophe that's taking place. This natural disaster, massive flames, right? Entire neighborhoods just burned to the ground as if they were bombed. Meanwhile, you're only really a couple miles away. And you don't see any of it, and you just, it smells not great, or the air quality index reads, higher than usual.
A couple miles away, you probably would see it, but we're a bit more than a couple
5 miles away. We're closer than you. LA seems bigger than it is because of traffic. Distance-wise, it's actually not that bad. I mean, it takes like an hour to drive 4 miles. But yeah, very, very, very surreal. I was tempted to drive out just to see the fires, but I'm busy. I don't really have time to do that. And C, also, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I sort of felt, I don't know, it's kind of strange to go see a spectacle. I mean, it is a spectacle for sure, but to see it for my own, it wouldn't be for amusement. I think just out of curiosity, but yeah, there's something strange about that.
I don't think I would want to see it just because you probably feel so helpless, seeing burn. I mean, the firefighters are still, I think, trying to contain it. It's only been contained like 27% or something like that, so it's still not fully contained.
Yeah, and with this recording date, I think the winds were supposed to, I've read that they're dying down, but they're also supposed to pick up, today and tomorrow, so we'll see what happens. But those are the two biggest fires. It wreaked havoc on the Palisades. A lot of the reports say the entire Palisades is gone. The last I knew of, because we know a few people, but one person who has a house there, and they were fine.
It's interesting because, every year, every summer, let's say, you hear of wildfires in California, in LA. Like, it's kind of like, unfortunately, like the routine of what you hear in the news. But I think this time around, it was kind of like out of the blue. First of all, it's January, so it's nice in LA, but it's not like crazy hot.
Yeah.
It's not really wildfire season, let's say. And then I think usually when wildfires happen, you would see it mostly in like, on the hills where there is like one house here, one house there.
Areas.
And it's more like basically bushes and trees and dried grass and stuff that's burning, and maybe somebody lost a house, Mm-hmm. And I think probably the last big fire maybe was the Woolsey fire in Malibu.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest one, and maybe one of the most destructive. But it's never been like streets and roads and businesses and blocks of homes burning. So this time around, I think everyone was kind of taken by surprise, caught off guard. Thinking, oh yeah, it's a little fire again burning, and then like houses would just
within hours
catch on fire within hours. And you see videos online of people getting home at night, and they're like, I saw a video this morning of this lady who like the Ring doorbell was recording her, and she gets home, she opens the door, she's like, hey honey, you should come outside and come see something. And they see the flames, and the flames are just moving so quickly toward their house, and it's like, they say, oh, you should have a backpack ready for like earthquake, or you should have a backpack ready for wildfires, or whatever tsunami emergency, like whatever region you live in, right? And oftentimes I feel like we all think, oh, we'll have time, or it's not going to happen, you know.
Of course.
But, like, what did these people were able to pack? They had to leave their house probably very quickly because the flames were moving fast, and they're not small flames, right? And, you have cars burning, you have homes burning, things can explode. I mean, it's not like just the line of the flame is coming to you. It's like there's things that, glass is gonna explode and project everywhere. Like, you can get hit, you can get hurt, right? So, I can't imagine being those people trying to evacuate their homes within like minutes.
Talking a brief aside, sort of, folks, we've already had a number of listeners reach out saying, are you going to discuss this on the podcast in a more serious way? This is just us kind of talking, and we will. So we are currently trying to plot out probably 5 episodes, something like that. I don't know, where we talk about in an interview specific individuals who are specialists in certain things, and we're trying to coordinate that. As I said at the beginning of the recording, we actually typically record the guest interviews well in advance. So we're going to try and expedite this process to get information out there in a more timely manner to cover all of this from the standpoint of being helpful, and also the architectural side of things and the urban development side of things and all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that. In addition, if you are in Los Angeles, there's a very large community of architecture, engineering, construction professionals who have come together. We're part of that group, and we are trying together to figure out how to organize ourselves to help each other and then help people who have lost their homes with our expertise. And I will put in the notes of this episode, there's a Slack channel that has been started, and the group is trying to see if we can get the Slack channel to be the pro version for free. I assume Slack will grant us that, but we're trying to find out. Anyway, I'll put the Slack channel in the links, so you can join that, keep tabs on what's going on, or contribute, or whatever. So, and if you have any thoughts or suggestions or anything about the fire that you would like to let us know about, I don't know, whether it be guest topics or other links that we should post in the episode notes, then reach out to us in the typical fashion, which the hotline is 213-222-6950, so you can text that. But talking about the fires itself, like you were describing, I think it happened a lot more quickly than anyone anticipated. I mean, the thing that really surprised me was that normally fires in hillsides, they move upward rather than downward because heat rises and other things. But because of the wind patterns in this case, they were being driven downward, and they were driven downward so much that, so the Pacific Palisades is on the west side, like I said, and then there's the Pacific Ocean, hence Pacific Palisades. And there's the PCH, which is the Pacific Coast Highway, which runs along between this ocean side. So you have that highway. It's
on the coastline.
Yeah. So if you're driving north on the left, you have a hillside that goes down to the beach, and right along that road, the highway, is a row of houses that face the beach.
Which I've always wondered, like, why would you build homes on that road?
Because it's an amazing view of the beach. Really.
I know, but it's just a road. Like, there's no pedestrian walkway, really. It's just like a really fast road people drive on.
Well, I mean, I think the benefit and the experience of those houses is not to have a nice walking experience. It's just to be inside your house and look at the beach.
I know, it's kind of atypical. It's like the ocean, a stripe of a band of beach, a band of house, and then a road, and then mountains and whatever.
It's kind of weird, but you find it in a lot of places, like Incline Village. It's the same thing, right? They have a single strip of houses.
But you are like a little bit, you're around a lake, so you want to build around. I mean, I understand the wanting there. It's just kind of like, if you look at the wider view, like if you look at a section cut, of where the house is located and what's next to it, it's kind of like,
it is weird.
It is a bit weird
because the PCH is not a scenic road that's very casual with trees, and it's not beautiful. It's a highway, and it's kind of gross. And a lot of those houses, when they front the PCH, they don't have an attractive facade. So I understand what you're saying. But the thing that I didn't expect to happen was the fire to cross the PCH and then burn down, 95% of the houses that are between the road and the beach. I don't think anyone thought that was going to happen because the PCH is pretty, I don't know how many lanes it is. It's like,
Maybe 4.
Maybe 4. But
still, maybe at some point they just choose.
It's not something that I don't know. I would have thought was going to take place, but it definitely did.
Well, and it's so close to the ocean too that you would have think that the ocean air would kind of like fight the flames or something. But I don't know exactly what was the source of the Pacific Palisades fire.
I had read recently that
arsony or brush fire or
they don't know. There's been no official report to my knowledge, but I think the latest data suggests that it might have just been an accident, it was a not an accident. What's the word? Random? I forget the word, but it wasn't an intentional thing.
Well, the thing is, it was really bad luck because that day was the day where there is very strong winds in LA and Southern California called the Santa Ana winds.
Yeah.
And it happened to be that day the winds were extremely strong.
Yeah.
So that little spark that started somewhere just blew out to be this giant fire. And I think kind of... It's almost like, you always wonder, like, could it have been avoided or could it have been managed faster, quicker, and better to avoid that much destruction, right?
Well, so I do want to talk about that. And, I've kept track of the news surrounding the fire fairly well. And but I'm also not an expert, so I could be mistaken with some of the things I'm about to say. But it's surprising how much misinformation there has been around these fires. I think big picture, there's a narrative and this idea that the fire ended up being as bad as it was, and we lost all these houses and all this destruction occurred because it was mismanaged. That if we had utilized our existing infrastructure and resources better, that we would have changed the outcome significantly. And or also that if we had a better infrastructure to begin with, and that was utilized properly, that we would have also greatly impacted the outcome of, let's say, the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire, specifically the two biggest ones. From what I've seen, what I've read and heard, all the experts that deal with these kinds of issues, so environmentalists, firefighters, no. If we had a better infrastructure, and to what degree better, that's we'll talk about that, and we did a better job at responding to things, the outcome would have been basically the same. There's a clip I saw, I think it was a professor from Cal Poly Pomona, who was like an environmentalist person, I forget. And he was I forget which news station, but he was saying exactly what I said. And he further stated that he was informed by a firefighter of some kind, that if I'm a firefighter and I'm facing a fire and there's 10-mile-an-hour winds, then I'm fighting the fire. If the fire exceeds 10 miles an hour, or it might have been exceeds 30 miles an hour, I'm not fighting the fire. I'm just observing the fire because there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
And the winds that we had here, I think, peaked at 100 miles an hour, if not a little bit higher. And they were, I think, a lot of them were at the 70, 80 mark. I think this is a good example of people coming to conclusions without just spending another 5 seconds while sitting on the toilet, doom scrolling, thinking about what they're about to type in as a comment. If you imagine you have a big fire and you have winds that are going 60 miles an hour, you know how fast 60 miles an hour is? Embers that are the size of golf balls. I've read somewhere that people saw chunks of tree that were the size of like Nike Jordans flying through the air, right? Embers of that size. Yeah. With winds at 60 miles an hour.
It's a fireball.
If you think, to put it in another way, to put it in perspective of the speed of the wind, the speed of these embers, when you cross a street as a pedestrian, like a surface street, and you have a car that's coming toward you and they're going, let's say 50 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, it always amazes me how little distance I make it across the street before that car is, they would hit me if they didn't stop at the stop sign. It doesn't take long at all. So now you have to imagine you have a whole army of giant embers flying down a hillside at 80 miles an hour, right? Igniting everything that they touch almost. All these wood houses and all these trees and things. And we have guys out there with hoses. Like practically, what do you think is going to take place? And also when the winds get to that high level, you can't use aircrafts to fight the fire, which is predominantly how you fight large fires, is with dropping massive buckets of water and fire retardants. You can't do that when the winds are too severe. So from all the experts and people, that I've kind of read and listened to, unfortunately, there's with the infrastructure we had, there's nothing we could have done really to change the outcome in a significant way. And in order to have a different infrastructure that would have decreased the fire by, let's say, 70% or something of that magnitude, you're talking about an infrastructure that is, I don't want to say it doesn't make sense, because that seems not kind when people have lost their houses, but it might not make sense, right? Like, that is a ridiculous amount of water, fire trucks, personnel, all that stuff you have to have sitting around all the time. And maybe it is worthwhile. I don't know. Maybe that's up for debate, but it's not close. It's not close. Of course, there's always areas for improvement, and there were budget cuts and things like that. I'm not trying to dismiss or downplay the importance of that, but it's,
I mean, to some extent, it's also like, are you trying to stop a giant flood, like a tsunami or whatever?
That's a good comparison.
Like, there is things you can build and put in place, but if it's a natural disaster, there's so much we're going to be able to do as little humans.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a tsunami that's on the scale of this, you have a blizzard that's on the scale of this, we're going to fight a blizzard with, I don't know, blowtorches, fight a tsunami with I don't know how you fight a tsunami. You fight
10 shovels.
Yeah, massive fire that's being driven down a hillside at 80 miles an hour. That's crazy. 80 miles an hour across. I mean, how many blocks can you cross going down a hill at 80 miles an hour if you're a shoe-sized ember?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I've seen videos of the fire, and they call that a firestorm.
Yeah.
And you do see it basically just rains ember. It rains and rolls embers, and it's extremely scary. There was also like fire tornadoes that even happened during those fires.
Yeah.
Because of the wind, the power of the wind, which I don't know, it's insane. But I think this time around, the Palisades fire got scary to a lot of Angelenos, because like you said, he was going downhill, and at some point, you really get into the city, and what if a big fire like that gets into the city? Like, how do you stop that? Because then, again, it's like rows and rows of homes, which is, what happened in Altadena, right? It's like blocks and streets were completely vanished because of it. And you wonder, like, what could we do as architects and in terms of construction? Because as a foreigner, and my dad always wonders, why do people build with sticks here? Mm-hmm. And, I'm always like, well, it's how people do things. And and then a wildfire happens, and all of those homes are gone because they're all built with wood. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like, well, yeah, the only thing you see standing in those photos of homes that have burned is the fireplace, the masonry fireplace.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that makes sense. The fireplace would be resilient to fire.
Fire bricks did their job. They resisted the fire inside
all these
and out.
fireplaces like, hey, I can see each other. What's going on?
But it's kind of, they become this beacon in the gone neighborhood. And it makes you wonder, like, yeah, why don't we build more with masonry or concrete? And there is other issues with that, right? There is like sustainability of building with concrete. There is like earthquake zones, and how does that work with, like seismic movements and things like that, and the cost. Of building with that. I also saw a video of a guy who was explaining, like, why do we build with, homes with wood in the US? And what he was kind of explaining is that just because it became a thing at some point that was kind of like what American homes were built with, and therefore people just kept doing it.
Yeah.
Which I understand.
Yeah.
But also, things need to evolve a little bit, and they need to make sense. So I don't know, like maybe in fire zones, like homes cannot be built with sticks. Maybe they should be required to, be built some other ways. Some of the homes that are still standing had sprinkler systems. And
of course, like you said, no one has a go bag. Everyone thinks like, well, we'll roll the dice kind of deal. The same thinking applies to very expensive things like sprinkler systems or other natural disaster, proofing systems. It's the thought is always, if I don't have to have that sprinkler system that's going to cost me tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the scale of the house, then no, I don't want it. So yeah, if we can do it without, then that's fine.
I mean, it's like, I don't know, getting insurance of any sorts, right?
That's what it is.
Think you need it until the day you actually needed it.
But there's also the question. So you were talking about how we build houses in the United States and doing it out of alternative materials and.
But that would make sense, that, I don't know, in those neighborhoods, let's say, that are more prone to be damaged and impacted by wildfires, that maybe there is, a guidebook, or there is like a baseline of design. Some cities in SoCal, for example, or even NorCal, have like HOAs or design guidelines you have to follow for aesthetic reasons. Mm-hmm. But how about, there is maybe 5 things that every home should have in order to be safe? The issue is that I don't think people have an issue in following it, and architects could implement those things, is that the problem is that a lot of the homes that burnt, especially, say, in Altadena and probably also in the Palisades, is that they were built at a time where those were not concerns. There are homes from like the 1950s or even 60s, earlier, right?
Yeah.
And none of that was a concern.
Yeah.
Like, it was not fire protected. There was no sprinklers. The glass was, single pane and probably not even like tempered.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Shards of glass everywhere. Yeah.
So so the issue is not so much with new construction, because I think like we're very well aware of like how we can do better things with new construction. The issue is always with older structures and people who cannot afford, retrofitting to new codes and new concerns.
The comment about older structures is a good one. And, again, our office, we do houses, and we do both new construction and remodels. And so therefore, we're walking into people's homes very often. Homes they've lived in for a long time, homes they've just purchased and they want to fix and change and whatever else. And we were just in one the other day in Beverly Hills. And I always forget how old some of these houses are when you step inside or you walk outside and be like, this is an old, the details I was pointing out, like the stucco doesn't stop short. It goes all the way to the dirt. I'm like, there's all these things. I'm like we don't, that's a no. Don't do that.
For me,
terrible.
It's when you take up a stair and the railing is at like 30 inches or something. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa, this is scary.
There's so many things, right? And it's the construction technology and the regulations in the positive sense have evolved to, so we don't do that anymore. We don't do a lot of these things. But, on the subject of building materials, the core materials like, stick framing, type 5, as we call it, versus out of masonry in France from like the 1500s or whatever era that all these structures were built in. It is just the fact, it's just because that's how it's evolved. And there's not necessarily, like in other countries, they build things out of CMU. And here it's like, why would you do that? That's extremely heavy and more costly because it's not common and whatever else. In other countries, they can build a bunch of stuff out of steel super cheaply and quickly because here steel is very expensive. And it's proof that has nothing necessarily to do with what is easiest from a fabrication standpoint. I think it's ties to like the larger patterns of trade and the economics of trade.
But it's interesting because if you think about for a minute about the cost of material, right? If you have high demand, you're going to have probably lower prices. Right? Like if everybody's building with wood is going to become the baseline, so it's going to be somewhat more affordable than if you're building with steel and only a handful of people are building with steel. Then it becomes a specialty thing, so it becomes more expensive.
Sure.
So you could say that if we all start building with steel, well, eventually the price of steel will come down.
Well, the price of steel is always changing depending on where we're getting it from, and that's something too. But you put in these systems in place to protect yourself or your house from a fire. If the fire is of a certain magnitude, then those systems will do their job and they'll protect your house from the fire and you'll have minimal damage. You do some repair work, it's maybe a little bit of remediation work, right? Then you move back in and you're fine. If the fire exceeds a certain threshold in terms of magnitude, those systems can be in place, but are they actually going to be helpful from a practical and livability standpoint? The structure might still be standing, but the amount of damage done to the structure might be so much that, like it's a car, right? You can the car can be physically looking okay, but it could still be totaled, meaning that the price to fix the car exceeds the value of the car, or it's not drivable because of, you know what I mean? Like a house can still be standing, still can't live in it because of all the toxic stuff that's melted.
I saw a story of a family whose home was impacted by the fire, but not completely destroyed. And, you know, it has to be remediated. Everything that's inside cannot be used. And they have kids, all of their toys, all of their belongings need to go. Like everything needs to be trashed. Yeah. And what is left needs to be cleaned up and made safe and repaired and tested, you know, because let's say if half of your structure burned, the other half is still stable. Like what are the risks that this is going to cause you problem or is also impacted in some ways? So
and the remaining structure just absorbing all of the plastics and if it's an old house, the lead paint and the metals, all the stuff that's burned and turned into ash. The other thing I was reading the other day is, you know, the air quality. There's the air quality index, air quality index, AQI, whatever it is, and it gives you a number from like 0 to 500 or something like that. And there are shortcomings with that metric, with all metrics, but in that particular case, it just tells you, I think, the amount of particles or something to that effect, but it doesn't tell you the type of particles. Mm-hmm. So you could have a number that's, you know, moderate, which is still much safer than, you know, severe levels of, you know, 200 and whatnot. But if the particles at a moderate AQI index are lead from old houses, that's very, very different than a 50 air quality index of like a normal day just from typical traffic smog and whatever else. But, you know, on the subject of houses being partially damaged and then repairing them, that's very parallel to when you have an old house that has not been damaged by a fire, but let's say you're about to buy a house and you buy a house that was built in the 50s or the 40s or the 60s and you want to, you know, do some remodeling. And the house has pretty much stayed in the same condition since the 50s. There hasn't been a massive updating to it. All those houses in California and other states, as we're doing right now, the construction methods are so outdated that if you're doing a significant remodel, will it cost more to do new construction? Yes. But how much more?
Yeah.
Right? Because you're ripping out all the finishes, all of the fixtures and appliances, all that goes. And that's a huge chunk of money, right? So like, so not to get too off topic, but like I was talking to a client the other day, or prospective client, about construction costs and you know, we talk about it as cost per square foot. Generally, that's how like we talk about it. Is it $400 a square foot, $500, $600, $1,000, $2,000, whatever it is? And they were confused by this metric. I said that's just a ballpark metric that we all use, despite we not like it because it's not very accurate. And that's like for an entire house. And he's like, well, someone told me it could be $2,000 a square foot to do a kitchen. I said, well, for sure. In LA, things are expensive. I said, for sure, because the kitchen is where all the expensive stuff is, right? The bathrooms are where all the expensive stuff is. Generally, the construction cost per square foot for a living room is not as high as the kitchen because you don't have appliances, you don't have tile, you don't have all these expensive things. Anyway, my point is, in a gut remodel, when you're replacing all of those finishes and then possibly replacing windows, right? Because they're single pane, they don't perform well, and you want windows that work. Sometimes they don't even work anymore. That's a huge chunk of the construction cost budget right there. And so, you know, recently we're working on a project and us and the client were facing that same threshold. Like, do we do a remodel of this house or do we do new construction? And we started off with a remodel scope. That's what we were going to do. And in addition to all the outer layer of the building, we also knew that we were going to change the floor plan. Because the floor plans of the houses from those times don't make sense for how people live now. Rooms are tight, ceilings are low, kitchens are closed off, and all this kind of stuff. And by the time you get to that level of work, you know, I think as the contractor we're working with put it well, he's like, you know, the cost difference between new house versus remodel in your case is the cost of demo, the cost of foundations, and the cost of maybe half of the framing. After that, it's all the same cost. And demolition, generally not the most expensive thing. Foundations, if you're on a hillside, it's expensive. In this case, we're flat. And half of the framing. And it's like, well, that's maybe worth spending that amount of money to have something that is, exactly what I want, that actually works for me, instead of being like a glove that's been sort of modified to kind of fit your hand. We can just make the glove to fit your hand for the cost of those 3 items. So anyway, going back to the fires, that's what I was thinking about when you were describing that house that was partially damaged by the fire. It's like, and unfortunately, just with the way everything falls, for a lot of homeowners, I see that they're kind of at that threshold. And I don't want to compare, people who've lost their houses to like a typical remodel. They're completely different situations emotionally, but, there are some parallels, right? And I'm also not advocating that we don't put in fireproofing systems. But
I think the big question here too is that basically, if you're planning to do work to your home and do a remodel, then that's that. Like, you can better things and get better product and better safety and better everything than what you purchase, with the original house you got. But if you are not planning to do any work, or you cannot afford doing any big remodel work, like, what can you do, to protect your home from wildfires? And I don't know that there is much you can do, honestly.
Landscaping is actually a big part of it. I think
landscaping,
you got to keep
your site clear, keep your site clean.
Keep things away from the house. So if they burn, they don't burn next to the house.
It's probably kind of like have a safety perimeter around the house. If you can't, protect the house, protect around the house. Yeah. It's probably the first thing you can do.
I mean, there are also what I would describe as less architectural things you can have. Like, they have consumer level fire hose things you can hook up so you can drain your pool to douse your house, and things like that. We'll see what happens with LA, and we'll see what happens with the people who rebuild, which we need to talk about, those types of people, who that's going to be, rather. But, a very likely possibility when it comes time to rebuild is that when homeowners see how much it's going to cost to implement these systems, they might say, yeah, either I don't have that money, so I can't, but I do need a house, so just build it without those things. Or I have that money, but I don't want to spend that amount of money on like these things, so let's forego that. It's the same. It's the same thing as building a house that is net zero or energy efficient, or makes use of solar, or has a gray water collection system, or all those types of sustainability features. Everyone says they want to do it, and a few people are serious about it, and even few people actually follow through, because it does, generally speaking, cost more money. And the cost of construction is way, way higher than what people think. And so when they see the numbers, they're like, I'm going to have to cut out a bunch of stuff just so I can get this done.
It also takes more time to get those things implemented on a project. It's not just the functional and aesthetic design. It's also this third part of the project that needs to be thought of.
It's another layer.
And another layer of coordination with everything else that needs to happen in the project.
And because it's not as common, when you go to do those things, it is an, quote, additional layer, as you've described it, but it also means there are fewer professionals out there who understand those things. So now you're getting to a more rarefied, section of the industry. So it just becomes more difficult and more difficult. Again, I'm not saying we shouldn't pursue those things as an industry, as a species. We should, but it just all projects have a budget, and all projects undergo some kind of value engineering of some sort. And I'm telling you, the things that get cut out first are the things that we're describing.
We're supported by Enscape. Enscape is a real-time visualization and VR tool that we personally use and recommend. And the reasons why we like it is that it's fast, realistic, and actually easy to use. The interface is great, and they have a good library of components. It also renders in real time, which means that you don't have to waste time waiting for the image to be rendered to see what it's going to look like. It's also also a plugin that works with all of the major 3D modeling program, and it's available for Mac and PC. So if you want to up your visualization and rendering game, I think you should look into Enscape. So make sure you click on the Enscape 3D link in our show notes for a free trial.
Hey, Marina, would you like to get your as-built faster? Of course you would. IPX has you covered. IPX lets you seamlessly transform your laser scans into LOD 300 BIM and CAD files. Whether you've got your 3D scans already or you need the full laser scanning service, IPX offers instant pricing and order tracking for scan-to-BIM services on any project, no matter the size or complexity. Plus, your BIM files can be seamlessly transferred to Autodesk Construction Cloud, allowing your construction team to start work right away. Start your next project on the 50-yard line with accurate data by clicking the IPX link in our show notes and learn more.
The Second Studio Podcast is sponsored by Autodesk. And do you know about Autodesk Forma? Available standalone or as part of the AEC Collection software bundle, it's a specialized AI-assisted 3D design tool that can transform early project planning. With Forma, you can rapidly model multiple massing options at the start of projects and analyze the embodied carbon cost of different volumes, layouts, and material choices. You can then deepen your understanding of your sites by incorporating real-world contextual data for daylight, wind, noise, and more. So start your projects right with Autodesk Forma. Check out the link in our show notes to learn more. It's thinking about the kind of like the rebuild of those neighborhoods and homes. You wonder if the city in where those fires happened are going to do anything for the rebuild. I mean, I don't know in what way, if it's in terms of like, I don't know, making permitting go faster or like giving some financial help for those neighborhoods to get rebuilt and maybe the same people, the same homeowners to be able to stay in those neighborhoods.
That would be...
Because, you can imagine what would happen is that, let's say people who were living in Altadena, they probably own a home that was like a starter home, let's say, in most California.
From 40 years ago or something.
Yeah, and maybe, the home was worth like $1 million or $1.5 million, right? And they don't have a home that they can sell to get that cash to get a new one, right? Yeah. Now they have an empty lot and they have to somehow find money to start from zero, which I don't know how much insurance would give, but from what I've seen, it seems like they give you only like a third of the value of what your house was, which we're talking maybe about like $400,000. You can't build a house for $400,000 in California. That's just, you can do a nice kitchen and bathroom remodels and that's it. You can build anything for that. Or you can, but it's going to be a shack, so it's going to burn again if that happens. So one could imagine that these people are just going to, sell their land and I don't know, rent an apartment to find housing. So therefore, these people are going to be displaced from where they were, and so I wonder if, I don't know, is there something that the cities could do to kind of make sure that these people stay in their neighborhoods? Because otherwise what's going to happen, right? They're going to be forced to sell their land to get some money back so they can live. And then what? Developers are going to buy those lots for, nothing and then just build a bunch of cookie cutter homes that are going to be crap.
Yeah, that's an interesting prediction or possibility, which could very well happen. I mean, it has happened before historically. It could happen again.
Because it's tempting from a developer standpoint to just see like those basically neighborhoods gone, right? And just kind of like take over a huge chunk and make a huge profit. So I think that we're describing, or like
there should be a way to...
And the urgency of rebuilding... is also another one. Like, maybe let's say these people are able to rebuild, but they don't have the time to wait a year, let's say, or a year and a half to have a home being built or designed, right? And they're just going to build it quickly. And it's, it's always like when there is natural disaster, like the emergency relief, emergency housing is kind of a question because these people can't stay at their friends for the next year, right? Or their families. They need to live in something. Yeah. But that's the danger of building those, let's say, emergency housing, is that those some things are supposed to be temporary relief that become long-term housing and are not done in a way that makes any sense.
Yes to all of it. I think the city is going to. We were speaking. We had heard from a person who works at the city the other day, and they were. I think, if I recall correctly, they were saying without saying that the city is probably going to implement some kind of leniency for approvals.
Why, no shit.
Because, permitting in Los Angeles and places like this sucks. It's terrible, right? So, and that's just like normal, because that's just bad. But they're going to try and make it easier for this sake. And it probably still won't be as easy as other places that we've practiced, which is the funny thing. Will the city, the state, or the federal government provide basically money to help people rebuild their houses or relocate or with temporary housing? I would not hold my breath for
No, I wouldn't. But, it's kind of like annoying because we pay so much taxes in California. It's like, well, maybe instead of buying tanks and guns for wars, let's just...
Well, that's not how it works exactly.
Help people, get back on their feet.
What makes sense is to figure out a way to solve the short-term temporary housing somewhere. You could erect it very quickly. It doesn't have to be perfect because it is temporary, like you said. It could be mostly prefab. Just get it going, right? So people have a place to be. It's critical. Most of these people, for the ones that are able to rebuild, which won't be many of them, but those who can, they've never done it before. They have no idea how long it takes and how expensive it is. Yeah. It's going to be very easy for the uneducated homeowners to choose the cheapest professionals out there. And it may be in certain instances that is the only option that makes sense. But as any practicing architect or contractor or engineer knows, you go the cheapest route, you're going to have problems. It's going to take longer. It's going to cost more money for the project itself. And then the end product is going to be way, way inferior. And you're probably going to have like serious construction issues later on with water coming in, all the stuff that doesn't happen as often with more trusted professionals. You go to the cheap route. They do all kinds of we've seen some weird shit done by contractors who are supposed to be really good, and they do high-end houses. And yet they do stuff. I'm like, that's not how you frame a window, you dunce. That's not, what are you doing?
But I feel like when and if people are going to rebuild, that they shouldn't go with the cheapest guy in town necessarily, because it's going to cause them problems. I also think that if they are, fire victims, that a lot of professionals in our industry would be willing to give them a break on their services, contractors included, architects included, engineers included, to help them make it work. So I feel like they shouldn't.
We are.
They shouldn't think that they can't ask for it or think that people would be able to help them in some ways.
Yeah, it's always worthwhile to ask. For what we're doing in our office, we're trying to find ways to give breaks to people who are trying to rebuild as much as we can, with who we are and what we do, to help. If we can do something, then we should. And, people are price gouging, renters.
That is absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, price gouging. And that's also the concern, too, that we have as an industry and that homeowners have as well.
Of course.
Like, there's going to be this influx of everyone needing to rebuild, whether it be the previous homeowners or new ones or developers. Some people are going to need to rebuild. Someone's going to rebuild, right?
And even people who are not impacted by the fires are worried about that happening to them as well.
And they're worried
because everybody's going to be so busy.
That the higher demand, higher the price, right? Because if I am a X whatever professional and I have 6 people coming to me saying I need to hire you and I can only take on one, in general market conditions, one could say, well, who's going to pay me the most? And I'll go that route. This is not the time to do that. No. This is the time to be lowering your prices, if anything, just to help out the communities that need help.
I mean, within the next day after the fire started, landlords starting raising the rents, and it's like,
really?
What is wrong with people?
Yeah.
There's people looking to rent a spot because they need to live somewhere. They have kids, they have jobs they're trying to maintain, so they actually don't lose everything in their life. And your response to that is to jack up the price by a few $100s because you see it's cha-ching, money. It's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't. I've even when cities have events and then everything goes up in price. I'm like, you guys are dicks. Like,
even Uber at like peak time charging more. It's like, it's shitty. Don't do that. Like,
yeah. If people have lost their houses and you're charging more, I mean, that's what are you people doing?
But that's one thing that I think was very positive from the whole fire experience that happened, is that you could see that LA is actually a pretty strong community.
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting because, we've lived in New York, and I feel like, in New York, you feel like a New Yorker. You feel like the next person in the subway next to you that you don't know is also a New Yorker, and we're all in this together.
Kind of like your cousin. Yeah.
Like, you know that if you're going to fall, like, they're probably going to help you, pick you back up or something, right? Depending where you're at. Yeah. But you feel like you're part of the same boat. In LA, it's very different because it's so sprawled and so big and so not pedestrian and not necessarily prone to social interaction unless you really go for it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't expect that community vibe to exist.
Yeah.
And right after even the first day the fire started, there is a whole bunch of people and things that got put in place, and people are willing to like help each other out, and I think also because of the size of the event, like, it's not just one person losing their home, it's like a whole neighborhood being wiped out. So it's a little bit like, you kind of think like it could have, like, if I own a house in the neighborhood across the street, like, it could have been me, it could have been my house, right? So there's a lot more a stronger feeling of support and community that goes that way.
That is an interesting observation, because the experience of LA is so fractured, right?
Yeah.
You're very secluded when you get from point A to point B. It's really about destinations and your own specific social enclave.
Yeah.
And geographical enclaves. And that's kind of LA. It's a patchwork of these pockets that you have to warp to via an extremely densely packed freeway.
But I think people who live in LA and are from LA are very proud of LA. So, I feel like there is that feeling of like being proud of the place you're in, and seeing it being destroyed or damaged or hits you personally in some ways. Could be.
To be totally honest, I've always felt fairly detached from all the places I've lived in. So I don't necessarily have that, innate, except for New York, because it's so frontal, the experience of the city. But everywhere else, I've always felt kind of detached from it. And I'm probably in my own headspace anyway most of the time. That's why. But your point about the Altadena specifically and the people who live there, I think I didn't know this, but I guess Altadena or portions of it were predominantly black. And a lot of people are saying if there's a way to keep that same population there, which is part of the identity and the culture of the neighborhood, that would be good, rather than this being a clean slate. So we come in, we build a bunch of new random crappy spec houses or whatever, and we whitewash the place for,
Well, that's the problem too. If those developers get in and build new, is that they're not going to build new and sell a home for $1 million, which is already like out of a lot of people's accessibility standpoint. They're going to sell it for more because they can. Now it's brand new. Yeah. And, so it's, I read that Altadena was one of the few places that wasn't redlined. So, the black community could buy and own a home there. So unfortunately now, it's half gone. So who knows what's going to happen, but...
So I'm also kind of curious to find out what will happen to the property values now that there has been a giant fire. Not because yes, because there's no house on them, but I mean, you have a neighborhood who burnt down. Is it desirable to live there?
Well, that's the thing, because what drives the price of real estate, right? It's like checking all the boxes. How many square feet? How many bedroom? How many bathroom? What street are you on? Mm-hmm. Is there a good school nearby? Is there public transportation? Is there a park? Mm-hmm. Is there like shops around? Like the neighborhood, safe? Right? It's like from the bathroom count all the way to like the neighborhood count, right? Well, if everything's gone...
Yeah.
How do you establish the value of the land and what's left?
I don't know. It's a mess. I would say what I was thinking is that the value of that entire neighborhood would go down, because you could imagine from the public's eye, it's like, well, I don't want to live in a place that burned down before because it might burn down again. But at the same time, the human species tends to think kind of short term, and we focus on what's in front of us.
We forget quickly, yeah.
And so it's kind of like, what? There's a Starbucks around the corner? You know what I mean? Oh, there's a Whole Foods or there's a TJ or whatever it is. Oh, well then, yeah, of course.
Well, and then also,
there's a fire 20 years ago. Well, whatever.
Well, and in the bigger scheme of things, it's like, well, what are the odds that it's going to happen again exactly in this place? And if it does, how long would it take for that to happen again? If it's like 60 years from now and I'm only planning to live here for 20, then I might just roll the dice,
That's the same thing, though, as like, do I bother putting in a bunch of money into sprinkler systems when they're not required? Yeah. And, sustainability systems, is it going to matter to me and my, and that's... Again, that's like the reality of it, right? We like to always try and think long term for ourselves and for our clients, everyone else, but there's a practical limit for most people. But you are right, though. So forgetting that speculation of what's going to happen with property values because of the fact the place was like firebombed. The fires aside, people in those financial situations who have lived in a house for the last 40, 50 years or whatever else, yes, their property value is $1.5 million in a normal neighborhood not affected by fires. That's a lot of money. That's not enough money to sell your house and go buy something else in a neighborhood that's going to be remotely as nice as what they have currently, right? And we've had clients before.
And you will be able to buy a house maybe for that price, but you're going to have to completely remodel it because it's going to be from the 50s. In which case you can't afford it. Or
you have to leave town. So again, forgetting the fires, we've had clients and people who they thought, like, okay, I've had this property for a long time. I've been here for a long time. Kind of want to shake things up. I'm going to sell it, buy something else. Okay, my property is now worth $1.5 million, $2 million, whatever the number is, right? Something around that ballpark. We're not talking about the $7 and $6 and $10 million ranges. Again, $1.5 or $2 million, that's a lot of money, especially if you come from a certain era. It's like, I bought this house for
$70,000.
Yeah, and now it's 1.5. Oh my gosh. Okay, now I go look at the market. What can I get for 1.5? Nothing. Okay, well, I guess I just stay here. And I also now hope that a fire doesn't come and get my house, because if it does, what the heck do I do? So without any financial assistance, what will happen, all those people will move. They're going to leave.
Yeah.
Even if they manage to sell their property at the previous market rate, they still can't afford to buy something as nice as they had before, and at that point they might be like, well, I'm just going to move to a different state or a different portion of the state, right?
Yeah.
Or the different state entirely. And
even rent, even if they were going to rent something somewhere, like, if you have a family, if you have kids, you need 2-3 bedrooms.
I know.
First of all, good luck finding an apartment with 3 bedrooms in LA. That doesn't run the streets. And also, you're talking about, a lot.
No one in those neighborhoods has $500,000 saved. I mean, I don't know. No one has $1 million saved up, and $1 million is not enough anyway. So what do you do? And so I do think there should be some serious financial assistance, because why else do we have an evolved society if not for situations like this? But it's just, anytime the conversation shifts to things like this, instead of it being a productive conversation about, okay, practically how do we solve this? What are the steps we need to take? It becomes politicized into the left and right and you and this and that and you and me and them and other, and
just finger pointing. And
it's like, God, can we just maybe focus more on
It's not, and at the end of the day, these families who lost their homes would just have to figure it out on their own, because nothing's going to get put in place.
That's why, on the positive side, you have at the the ground level people trying to do what they can do to help. They volunteer, they donate money. You have, in our case, building professionals coming together to try and figure out what can we do, how do we do it, and all these things. It would be terrible if the neighborhoods of Altadena and areas like the Palisades will be fine. People have money over there. Not to downplay the heartbreak that they've experienced, because it still sucks. And not everyone in the Palisades is ultra wealthy. A lot of people in the Palisades have had their houses for a very long time, like we described. Yeah. And they're also stuck. What do they do,
Well, and you can take on a mortgage, but it's 6% right now. So, that doesn't...
Yeah.
It's bad timing, really.
Yeah, and I don't even know, what will banks do? I want to take on a mortgage to live in the Palisades. Didn't that just burn down? Yeah.
I want to take a construction loan. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, here's a loan at 50%. But it would be really bad for all the neighborhoods, but let's say Altadena, if, like you were saying earlier, developers came in, they just bought up big areas of land and then built stuff.
And it's not just like, rows and of homes and little neighborhoods. I think the downtown, the old town of Altadena is gone. So it's going to be a brand new downtown. And it's, it's always great to have like new life and fresh everything because it's like a new start. It's very appealing. People are happy, excited. There's new things happening, this and that. But I think it's also a risk for, again, like strangers and people from a bunch of places to come and really change what the town used to be. And the people that were there, like not being able to stay where they're from and where they grew up and where their childhood home was. And,
So there's like a couple different facets to the rebuilding effort. There's the money to do it. There's doing it, right? There is the people of who's going to be able to be there afterwards, which is the things we just talked about. And then the third layer is the design quality of what's going to be designed and built, and the construction quality. And it's going to be very tempting and easy to go the cheap route. I mean, when I say cheap route, I mean the ultra cheap route. Build a bunch of stuff that looks like crap, feels like crap, performs construction-wise like crap. That could happen. And that tends to be what developers do, by the way. And then even beyond that, there's like the question of design excellence beyond avoiding the crap, which is, to your point, like how do you create a place that has some feeling of authenticity when it's all brand new? And this, we've talked about this before in past episodes. Authenticity is what makes a place or house or structure or neighborhood, whatever, a city, feel correct. Mm-hmm. Authenticity tends to become self creates just with time, for better or for worse, right? Things that are old feel authentic. Doesn't mean they're good, but that's the nature of how we work in our psychology. How do you create something that feels meaningful and authentic and of a place when the entire neighborhood is new? The houses and the commercial, everything's new. How do you do that?
I mean, even the landscape, there is no old trees probably left in those towns. Like, it's like it's going to be a blank slate.
And even with professionals who are good at their jobs, it's still really difficult to do what I'm describing. Like, how many places have we been to, neighborhoods or wherever else? It's all brand new. And everyone's excited because it's brand new, it's clean, it's a new thing in the town. And whenever you go there, like, this is... it feels generic. It feels inauthentic. It doesn't feel like it has a soul. It just feels...
Well, and 10 years later, it looks like shit.
And then 10 years later, it looks like shit. So that is, again, kind of like a, higher level, kind of architecture design thinking, but it's important. And so I think it's actually very, very critical that architects be very involved in this process and being outspoken and just being active and trying to do something to make sure that what's built is
being an advocate for good things to happen, like good architecture, good design, good planning, good everything to happen.
Yeah, because it is a pivotal moment, right? It's not all common. You have entire neighborhoods of this amount of acres gone.
No, and I think Altadena had a really strong artist community living there. There's a lot of artists of different kinds. So, I mean, you could imagine what the place feels like when you have, let's say, an artist community living there. And if that community is gone, what is the place going to become,
Yeah. The key aspect of it is connecting the right people, the professionals, let's say, the trusted professionals with the right people. But those connections don't often exist, right? How many people do we know, homeowners, who we meet and they've done a project of their own and they're like, oh, it was a catastrophe. My contractors sucked. I had all these problems. Oh, the architect problems, this problem, that. And you visit their house like, yeah, this is pretty bad. And it's not because they didn't have the money to pay a little bit more or the same price for a better person. They just didn't have the connections. They weren't connected, right? They couldn't find them. So I think as an industry, we have to be better at I guess marketing is the word, although that doesn't seem to have the right tone. Better at putting ourselves out there so people can find us and we can connect with them and them with us. And especially if we have a situation like this where it's going to be infilled with something. And it's a question of who's going to swoop in is one way to describe it. All right. Well, this entire recording was about the Los Angeles fires.
And mostly David talking.
That's not true. Well, then you want to give some closing remarks?
Yeah, stay safe out there. Yeah. Stay dry.
Stay dry. That's not the problem. Stay wet.
Stay wet.
Stay wet. Stay hydrated.
No, but if you know anybody who's been impacted by the fires, we'll have again some resource links on the episode description for this one, and we're working on this mini series specifically to address those issues. So if you have any topics, any guest suggestion, any experts that you think would be very helpful for people to see on the show, feel free to reach out. The hotline is 213-222-6950. We also have the website. You can reach us on there as well. And Instagram, a DM is also a quick way to get a hold of us. And what else?
Office-wise, again, our office is we're going to be giving basically price discounts for people who had homes that were damaged or burnt down because of the fires.
So we're not going to increase our prices. We're going to do the opposite. No, we're not increasing.
We're doing the opposite. All right. That sounds good. Did you cover the outro? No. I mean, this is the Second Studio. We have an Instagram, Second Studio Pod. We have a website, Second Studio Pod. We have a hotline, which is 213-222-6950. You can call and leave a voicemail or text the number. And then we have our office, which is Fame Architecture and Design. And you just find us out there on the internet. So reach out, and everyone be well and talk soon.
Yep. Okay, sounds good. Bye-bye.